One thing that's very important, and we forgot to mention, and you're going to hear it from all three of the presenters now, is that this is not legal advice. I know. It's sad, but true. Sean is a lawyer. He is an Ottawa-based lawyer with Innovation LLP, and he will be giving lawyerly advice, but this is not legal advice. MAAWG does not provide legal advice to your company under any circumstances. And that's being videoed, and we now have your acquiescence and proof that we are legally protected. But all joking aside, if you need legal advice, hire a lawyer. So, in terms of our presenters, again, Andre Leduc is a senior policy analyst for Industry Canada, the government agency in charge of development and deployment of Canada's anti-spam law, CASL. And Sean Brown is a lawyer with Innovation LLP of Ottawa and Toronto. And so I'm going to hand it over to Sean to take you through part two. For those of you who missed part one, there will be video, and the presentation will be up on the MAAWG members website along with the Q&A. We ask that you hold all of your Q&A until the end of each section, which we've divided up into 20-minute bite-sized chunks so that they work well with video. So write your questions down, and we will have time to answer them all. And so over to you, Sean.
Thanks, Neil. And I would put an even further caveat out there that I wouldn't even call this lawyerly advice. This is, I would say, in most cases, my own personal opinion and understanding of how I think the law is intended to apply. But I could very well be wrong with anything that I say here. So now that Andre's gone through the law and provided an overview of what's in there, the main requirements, and talked about enforcement and oversight, I think it's useful to just, using CAN-SPAM as a comparison and a baseline, because that's the law that everyone here is already familiar with, just run through some of the similarities and some of the key distinctions. And it's kind of a good way to recap what's in CASL. So despite the fact that there are some key differences, consent being the biggest difference between CASL and CAN-SPAM, there's actually a number of similarities. And it's going to be interesting to see as we move forward and as CASL is applied and interpreted, the extent to which some of the experience under CAN-SPAM, the decisions in the rulemaking by the FTC, the extent to which that might influence and color the way that CASL has applied in Canada. So in terms of some of the most significant similarities, first of all, there's a general requirement under CAN-SPAM and CASL for senders to accurately identify themselves when we're talking about who you are and your contact information. Be truthful and honest about that. The general prohibition against false and misleading transmission data or subject lines. Again, you know, be honest and accurate in the information that you provide. General requirement for an unsubscribe mechanism. There are a few distinctions that I'll get into on the next slide. And generally speaking, Andre talked about this concept of follow the money, so the ability to sort of go up the value, the spam chain to get after, you know, who's actually profiting from these schemes. Generally speaking, that's something that's provided for under both laws. And obviously there are a number of key differences. Andre has talked about a lot of this already. CASL applies to a broad range of internet issues. So we see spam and spyware and farming and phishing and a whole host of potential internet-related threats that are addressed under CASL. CAN-SPAM obviously deals with spam only. And when we're talking about electronic messaging, CAN-SPAM applies only to email, but CASL applies to potentially any type of electronic messaging that you can possibly think of. Although for the time being, live and recorded voice messages and fax messages are currently excluded from CASL. The concept of a commercial electronic message under CASL is very broad, And I think you could say that this is more broad than the concept of a commercial email under CAN-SPAM. CASL applies regardless of the proportion of commercial content. So under CAN-SPAM, we have the concept of a transactional or relationship message, and then on top of that, we have this concept of a primary purpose. So we get into this exercise of determining what the primary purpose of the message is. We don't have that under CASL. Either it's a commercial electronic message or it isn't. CASL is primarily opt-in, or I think a better way to describe that is permission-based. You need consent, generally speaking, in most circumstances, before you send a message. Obviously, under CAN-SPAM, you don't. It's an opt-out regime, meaning that you can technically email any person at least once until they opt out. Under CAN-SPAM, we have that provision that deals with sexually oriented content. We don't have any similar rules like that under CASL dealing with any specific types of content. Under CASL, Andre talked about this. The way the law is written is that a sender must give effect to an unsubscribe request without delay. And some people are interpreting that to mean that you can't send any more messages once the request has been made. Under CAN-SPAM, the request takes effect, the sender must give effect to the request within 10 business days. And something that's come up under CASL, the way the law is written, and this could actually potentially, I think, cause problems for some people, is that it's drafted so that an unsubscribe request takes effect when it is sent, whereas under CAN-SPAM, the request takes effect when it is received. So what this means is it opens up questions as to whether you could potentially be liable for an unsubscribe request that never actually makes it into your system. And we can talk about this a little bit more later on. Under CASL, the mechanism must be valid for 60 days. It's only 30 days under CAN-SPAM. And another very, very important difference, and this is one that really, I think, resonates with a lot of US senders and lawyers, is the fact that the private right of action is available to anyone who is potentially affected by a violation of CASL or a violation of related provisions under the privacy legislation and the Competition Act. And this is a very significant difference and much more broad than what's provided for under CAN-SPAM, as the private right of action is available only to providers of internet access services. So that concludes that very brief comparison between the two laws. So I'll now open it up to any questions that anyone might have.